Imagine, just for a second, that you're miles away from civilization, completely swallowed by the earth. The air is bone dry. There is this absolute, deafening silence of the deep desert all around you. You look up, and claustrophobic sandstone walls are towering stories above your head, blocking out everything except a tiny sliver of sky. And the worst part? Your right arm is pinned relentlessly beneath an 800-pound rock. You have zero cell service. Not a single person in the world knows where you are. So what's in your inventory to survive this absolute nightmare? Well, you've got exactly 1 liter of water, 2 convenience store burritos, and an incredibly cheap, terribly dull promotional multi-tool. As the scorching desert days bleed into freezing, merciless nights, and your body actually starts shutting down, you are forced to make a truly unthinkable choice to survive. Welcome to The Explainer.
It's a chilling question, isn't it? What would you do if your life was pinned beneath 800 pounds of solid rock? Would you just surrender to the darkness, or would you somehow find the ferocious will to fight your way out? Before we descend into the canyon to find out exactly how one man answered that terrifying question, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. You absolutely won't want to miss a single one of our documentary-style explainers, where we break down the most fascinating, intense, true stories out there. Okay, let's head down into the canyon. The year is 2003, and the man at the center of our story today is Aron Ralston.
So who exactly is Aron Ralston?
Well, he was a pretty profound study in contrasts. On one hand, you've got the engineer. Aron was a brilliant mechanical engineering grad from Carnegie Mellon University. The guy had an incredibly sharp mind. He played the piano, spoke fluent French, and worked a highly demanding job as an analytical, logical problem solver for Intel. Meticulous, structured. But on the other hand, you have the extreme adventurer. Because out of nowhere, Aron abruptly quit that cushy, lucrative corporate job and moved out to Colorado. He was just driven by this relentless thirst for adrenaline. He became totally obsessed with risk. We're talking solo climbing over 50 of Colorado's 14,000-foot peaks in the dead of winter. It's an incredible feat for sure, but this extreme lifestyle bred a fatal flaw: overconfidence. Aron honestly began to feel invincible. And because of that hubris, on a sunny day in April, he made the ultimate adventurer's mistake. He went alone into the sprawling wilderness, and he didn't leave a trip itinerary with anyone.
Section 1. The Engineer and the Boulder. On what started as a beautiful spring day in Bluejohn Canyon in Utah, the unimaginable happened. A seemingly stable boulder dislodged, violently crushing Aron's right arm against the canyon wall, trapping him in a tomb just 3 feet wide. The initial shock of that impact was completely surreal. The overwhelming wave of pain was unlike anything a human body is supposed to experience. For the first 45 minutes, Aron was just consumed by this pure, adrenalized, animalistic rage. He was literally punching this unmovable, gritty sandstone rock with his free hand, screaming into the void, cursing like a pirate, and violently trying to just brute force his way to freedom. The terror of being buried alive sent his heart racing to its absolute limit, but eventually the extreme adventurer had to step back, and that Carnegie Mellon engineer had to take over. Aron realized pretty quickly that brute force is completely useless against 800 pounds of immovable stone. He had to think his way out. So he forced himself to use a crucial survival rubric, the STOP method. Stop, take a breath, think, observe, and plan. He forced his hyperventilating lungs to slow down, took a ragged breath, and logically approached his entrapment.
To really understand just how doomed he was, we have to look at his meager inventory. This was the sum total of what he had to survive the brutal elements. 1 single liter of water. Now, in the arid, high desert environment of Utah, the dry air constantly saps moisture right out of your lungs and skin. 1 liter? That's barely enough for a few hours of exertion, let alone days of survival. He also had 2 cheap convenience store burritos, some stretchy climbing rope, a video camera, and a multi-tool. And look, calling it a survival knife is giving it way too much credit. It wasn't some high-end serrated blade meant for rugged outdoorsmen. It was literally a free promotional giveaway he had lying around in his glove box that just happened to come bundled with a tiny flashlight. The blade was practically as dull as the handle of a spoon.
Section 2. A Vision in the Dark. Over the next few agonizing days, Aron desperately tried to engineer an escape with the stretchy rope and dull tool, but every single physical attempt failed. For 127 agonizing hours, he underwent a brutal physical and mental deterioration. Day 1, as we know, was pure panic. But the days that followed, a slow, horrifying descent. By day 3, his water was completely gone. The blistering heat of the day would give way to freezing, 36-degree desert nights. And remember, he had no jacket. The severe chill relentlessly sapped his core temperature, while his trapped arm lost all circulation. Realizing the end was closing in, he pulled out his video camera to record his final goodbyes. By day 5, he was so absolutely certain he was going to die right there that he used his dull knife to carve his own epitaph, his death date, deep into the sandstone wall. But then, day 6, something extraordinary happened. Hovering on the absolute brink of death, hallucinating from profound dehydration and severe blood loss, he had an out-of-body vision. He saw a 3-year-old blonde boy running toward him across a wooden floor. In the vision, he scooped the boy up with a handless right arm. He realized in that profound mystical moment, this was his future son. He had a life waiting for him outside of this dark canyon. He just had to get to it.
In the darkest depths of that canyon, he realized a profound truth. You cannot simultaneously hold profound despair and profound gratitude in your heart at the same time. You think that recording your last will and testament on a camcorder at the bottom of a dark hole would be the ultimate moment of defeat. But actually, as Aron spoke into that lens, thanking his mom, his dad, his sister, and his friends for the unconditional love they gave him, he felt something entirely unexpected. He felt overwhelmingly full of love. Gratitude literally displaced his fear. It swept away the crushing despair of his impending death and replaced it with his fiercely burning desire to live. That gratitude became the pure, untamed fuel he needed for what came next.
Section 3. The Ultimate Sacrifice.
By the dawn of his final day in the canyon, Aron definitively knew that the only way to leave the canyon alive was to leave his right arm behind. Now, the sensory reality of this moment is almost beyond human comprehension. When Aron took his promotional multi-tool and finally managed to pierce the skin of his trapped arm, he made a truly sickening discovery. The blade was so incredibly dull that it couldn't even easily cut through his arm hair. His hand had practically jellified from being crushed and completely deprived of blood for almost a week. As the blunt blade entered his arm, peeling away the flesh like the skin of boiled milk, the trapped gases of decomposition escaped with a putrid, overwhelming smell. And then, the dull blade hit a dead stop. It was resting right against his solid radius bone. He realized right then and there that using brute force to saw through his own bones with a blunt, cheap blade was physically impossible.
At that moment, the analytical engineer stepped aside. Pure, unfiltered human survival instinct took over. Aron realized he didn't need to cut the bone. He needed to break it. He violently hurled his entire body weight against the boulder. He actually used the very 800-pound rock that was killing him as leverage. He bent his arm at this unnatural, horrific angle. He pushed with absolutely everything he had until a sharp, distinct snap echoed in the silent canyon. It sounded exactly like a cap gun crack. His radius bone was broken. Then he torqued his body again, snapping the ulna. And as he finally began to hack through his own remaining flesh, severing the thick nerves with that painfully dull blade, an incredible thing happened. Aron was smiling. I mean it. It wasn't pain on his face. It was a strange, euphoric triumph. He was taking a massive, bloody step out of his own grave.
But here's the crazy part. Leaving his arm beneath the boulder was only step 1. 65. That is the number of feet he still had to rappel down a sheer cliff immediately after the amputation. After spending an hour hacking off his own limb, applying a makeshift tourniquet, and bleeding profusely, he somehow rigged his climbing gear with one bloodied hand. He lowered himself down that 65-foot drop. Once he hit the bottom, he was severely dehydrated. He had lost 40 pounds and over 2 liters of blood. And yet, he simply started walking. He stumbled for miles through the unforgiving, scorching desert. He was hallucinating, his vision tunneling as the midday sun beat down on his battered body. His entire universe shrank down to just the agonizing effort of putting one foot in front of the other.
Section 4. Rescue and Rebirth. After hiking for over 5 grueling hours, Aron's body hit its absolute physical limit. The blood volume in his system was critically low, and his heart was beginning to fail. He was literally minutes away from collapsing and dying in the dirt. And then, he heard a roar in his chest that expanded outward into the clear blue sky. A search and rescue helicopter. Miraculously, his mother, operating on pure intuition and maternal love back home, had noticed he was missing from his job. She meticulously figured out generally where he might be and mobilized the authorities. They plucked him out of the canyon right as his vital organs were shutting down. Aron survived. But the man who walked out of Bluejohn Canyon was definitely not the same man who walked in. That extreme adventurer who needed to conquer the tallest, most dangerous peaks just to feel worthy, he was gone. Instead, his entire worldview shifted to a single powerful mantra: I'm still here. Today, Aron finds his ultimate victories in the everyday quiet moments. A morning cup of coffee, a bear hug from his teenage son, the the exact same sun he hallucinated in the canyon. He realized that our true legacy isn't what we accomplish or conquer, it's how we love and deeply connect with others.
Section 5. Surviving the wilderness.
Look, Aron's story is an extreme, one in a million ordeal, but the preventative lessons learned from it apply to absolutely anyone stepping foot into nature. The most crucial rule is also the simplest one. Share your trip plan. It sounds so basic, right? But it is the ultimate key to surviving the unforgiving wilderness. It was the single fatal step that Aron completely skipped. If he had just told someone, anyone, exactly where he was going and when he planned to be back, search and rescue would have found him on day 2, not day 6. Add to that the absolute necessity of carrying extra water. You need at least a gallon a day in the punishing desert heat just to stave off severe dehydration. You've got to know your physical limits and pack the 10 essentials. Proper life-saving gear, not just some promotional multi-tool you found rattling around in your glove box. Thorough preparation is literally the only difference between a magnificent hike and a waking nightmare.
Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. Aron Ralston's story is visceral, and yeah, it is undeniably terrifying. But at its absolute core, it's a profound lesson in human agency and resilience. As Aron himself realized, we don't get to control what happens to us in this chaotic life. We are all going to face unexpected, heavy burdens. We cannot control the literal or metaphorical boulders that fall unexpectedly into our paths, but we retain the ultimate, unyielding power, the power to choose exactly how we respond. Will we succumb to the darkness and despair, or will we find the gratitude, the love, and the ferocious, burning will to say, I'm still here? Think about that as you face the inevitable challenges in your own life today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember to subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive. See you next time.